You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to an episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today, but before we do, huge shout out to our sponsors. The Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is the Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma. And it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. A huge shout out to Governor Anatoby for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my two pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my two golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. Adding to that is the Doghouse, and so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too, but I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC, and hopefully our pups will run into each other. What's up, guys? Welcome back to an episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode. We're down at the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. It gives me great pleasure to sit with 2024 inductee, visual artist, Mr. Greg Burns. Greg, thanks so much for coming in today.
It's a real pleasure to be here, Mike.
So it's been, I guess, almost a year since you were inducted into the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. We're in the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. What's the memories that come to mind coming back to this building?
Well, it's hard to believe it's a year. I mean, it's a great, vivid memory for me because I had seen videos of previous inductions in the Hall of Fame thing, but nothing was like actually being there. It was like being in a pinball machine or something. I mean, my eyeballs weren't big enough. The enormous energy and it's hard to describe. And I would say, if I could do a picture of it, a picture is supposed to be worth 1,000 words, but I couldn't even think about doing a picture of it. And so it's magnified from there. I mean, it was truly an extraordinarily magnificent experience. I have to say that. Whatever kind of words, adjectives that you could use. Awesome. I mean, really, none of that really works. It was all of those and more. Some words that I haven't even come up with yet.
Mm-hmm. Had you had any mutual friends or people that you've been colleagues or just come to passing with, been inducted previously?
Well, I know a number of them. Jimmy Webb, I've seen him a number of times at the Blue Door, and he's not a great knocking around pal or anything, but and also Mike Larson. He's a fellow artist and a contemporary and a person that I have great respect for, and Lee Allen Smith, among others, and Clay Bennett, and those people. Clay, a big applause to you with your Thunder team, and just so many people, and the inductees that I felt humbled being around them, and so it was an extraordinary experience, and I'd say. That this is an incredible building and full of amazing history. We had a bunch of family here, and as they were looking around all the other previous Hall of Famers, they were surprised, by how many there were Oklahomans that they knew of and all that kind of thing. So, it has to humble you to be, maybe humble isn't the right word. Maybe I'm supposed to feel like the Hall of Famers, like I'm all puffed up. Now I'm a really big person. I've made it. I didn't go to jail. I went the other way. And it's amazing. I kind of don't know why I was inducted, except I sort of do. And, whether my artwork is great or not, or the things that I've done with my paintings over the years is one of the reasons or examples. Another might be my disability, that I've overcome all these things. But, I haven't done that. Other people have helped me do that. And you could paint, you could be like poor Vincent van Gogh, I guess he wasn't a great success. And I don't really understand that after seeing being able to see so many of his paintings in real life. That they don't, how could he have not been thought of in his own time? When you look at it, look at his work in comparison to the other impressionists or whatever you want to call them at the time, it's head and shoulders above 90% of all of it. As far as I'm concerned, it's the very tip top. How could you not feel that way? And that he wasn't successful in his lifetime, and he overcame all that to be persistent enough to produce all that magnificent work. Really. Whereas I've had people, oh, isn't that the greatest little thing I ever saw? That's what my mother thought. And all on, so I forgot what your question was, but maybe I answered part of it.
Yeah, no, totally. It just talking about being in the Hall of Fame and also memories of coming, back this building and what this building kind of triggers in you when you come back to it, knowing that you were gifted Oklahoma's greatest honor and have a medallion now.
One of the more interesting parts of the Hall of Fame for me was our rehearsal the day of the, you go through the whole thing. And so we were all there, and they had they had the orchestra there and everything. And they come out and get you, and then they take you back stage. You're kind of queued up. So they take a couple, 3 of you at a time. And it came my turn. And so I was in there. And of course, it's pitch black behind there. And there's an elevator that raises you up about 2 feet to get to the stage level, And it's one of those kind of my favorite kind of elevators that I've always run across. It's one of these kind of little, and it slowly lifts you up. And you have these little gates that you go through, so they don't want anybody losing any toes or anything. And so it makes quite a bit of noise. And so anyway, the guy said, during the actual show, we're going to wait until there's applause or something going on, and then we'll do this, and then they won't hear it. I said, yeah, that's great. And so the guy that was in charge of this, he's not getting my humor with this. And so we get up there. I'm on the stage level, and there are people there with little iPads or something. They're looking at the video thing, and they've got headphones on, and they're doing all this kind of stuff, and they're pointing here and giving you signals, and there's some kind of chairs that are up close to the stage, and there's a couple. There's a lady there, she was like one of the first ones, she was extraordinary. She was the AT&T president and all this kind of thing, and so I'm driving in this very wheelchair, and I'm driving up there, and so they call me out, and so I'm driving out there, and my tires get caught in, there's this big pipe network of all these with the curtains. And so my chair gets caught in it winds around this thing, and it pulls that curtain over on top of that lady. And I mean, there are no bars there. There's a bar at the top, but it landed way over that way. So she was covered in the drapes. I was covered in the drapes. And it knocked that thing over, and then that knocked another thing over, and you could hear all these curtains all around everywhere that were falling over, and so the lady up there in front is screaming, "Mayday," it's like, and so anyway, to make a long story short, it took, all of a sudden all this crew showed up from all over everywhere, and they got everything straightened out and back up. And I went out, we did our thing, and then I left, and all that kind of thing. So later on, so I'm thinking, this could be a disaster, later. And so at the event, I come out there, and there are little lights all over everywhere, and the curtains have been pulled back probably 5 feet on both sides, And there's no way. So anyway, that was the best part. If that would have happened during the actual, if I hadn't done that, and they probably wouldn't have done anything about it.
Right.
And then later on during the thing, because they said, well, it's going to be on TV, but just for an hour.
Yeah.
So we anything that runs over that. So I was thinking, if I'd knocked that over, that whole show probably would have been 15 minutes. Anyway.
Because as you're wheeling on, you just see the dominoes falling, right? And things stand. You just like, oh my gosh.
It was a slow motion. It's like, well, they both go like this, and then like this, and then.
Let's fast forward then to that ceremony and your speech, and tell me a little bit about the relationship you have with Gail Sempner, who was your the person who introduced you that day.
Well, Gail is a lifelong friend almost. I think I went to grade school with her at Christ the King, and her husband Barney, and we rode the bus. The Christ the King bus, and we went to all our different neighborhoods. And Gail is just she has more friends than I can think of. Anybody, she knows everyone, and she's the absolute closest friends with that person, and she's 100% dedicated to whatever she does. She's one of these rare people that she should be in the Hall of Fame, really. She's so civic minded, and she and Barney, they asked us out to dinner, and she said, "I really think you should do this," because I really wasn't in favor of doing it. I didn't want to do it. I didn't think there was anything special about me, and I thought I'd already had all my desserts. I'd already been honored enough. I've been very successful here in Oklahoma City, and I'm happy, and I'm we had a successful gallery, and I was in the arts festival, and I've done all kinds of things, and I thought that was enough. And anyway, she said, "I just think it's important that you do this," and so, and then my wife said, "Well, maybe you should think about doing it." And then I said, "Well," I said, "I'll do it if you'll introduce me, And then she said, "Oh no, I would never do that." So I said, "Well, there we go. If you won't do it, I won't do it." And so I said, "Well, you think about it." And so anyway, she must have agreed, because there she was.
Yeah. The other thing too that you get when you're inducted is that you get your portrait in this building, mm-hmm. and some are painted and some are photographed.
Right.
I know there's an interesting story about yours, because you did yours yourself.
I did.
Can you tell me about it?
Well, actually, it's from a few years ago, and we spent the winters in Florida for about the last 35, 40 years or so. And my wife inherited her parents' condominium in Pompano Beach. And we'd gone down there way before they gave it to us, because they say, "Well, you guys need to go down there," and so we did. And so Florida it is a unique experience. It's beautiful. It was right on the ocean. Couldn't have been any. It's probably, our condo was probably as close to the ocean as you could get. I mean, really. And it had been there since 1954. It was the first high-rise building in Pompano Beach, and it was 5 stories high. And so now it's surrounded by all these things that are 80 stories high, and stuff like that. And so I felt when we were leaving, and we finally decided we'd had enough of Florida, and the hurricanes had, and definitely the rising sea had made a big difference. We watched it disappear. We watched the beaches disappear, and then they'd spend jillions of dollars bringing these gigantic Tonka trucks in, and they'd re-beach it. And then another one would come and it was unbeach it. And then the second time, it's like you see that. And it's like, so when we decided we're going to come back. We kind of got tired of it. And it's hard to get down there. We drove down, and in my Toyota ramp van, loaded up so you couldn't see anything out of it. That's the way we went down there, and that's why we came back home. So I felt like I'd accomplished something, just kind of being down there, and so I put this old wheelchair in there that was kind of broken and falling apart, and I had me standing out there, on the beach, and I just felt, I've been healed. I don't know why, or from what, but it was just kind of a triumph. I made it down there, and now we were safely getting out of there. And so it was kind of it's, maybe that's not a clear definition of why I did it, but that's kind of what I was thinking. It's like, I did it. I got down here, and we did a lot of water stuff. I got in the water. I got in the ocean and got my bathing suit full of tar sand, you know, and enjoyed the beach. You know, it was sand and cigarette butts, and you know, all this kind of thing. And the people were really nice, but they were also, you know, once you drove out of your building parking lot, your life was in your hands. You know, it was like people would make hard right turns from the far left lane, and traffic on I-95 would be 85 miles an hour and then 1 mile an hour within 75 feet. All of a sudden you'd see brake lights on and you better mash your brakes. Don't think about it. Just do it. You know, so there's so many Florida things, you know, that, you know, anyway. And, you know, and I met people from all over the place, you know, New York, Canada, New Jersey.
Yeah.
You know, and, but, I mean, it was fun. I enjoyed it. But it's good to get out there.
Yeah. You said just now, you talking about your being inducted, and you didn't feel like you were special enough because you felt like you'd had all your desserts and you felt you've been recognized a lot, whether it's nationally or the Oklahoma City Arts. What goes through your head? What goes through your head when you think you're not special enough? In what way do you think you're not special enough to be recognized as someone who? Well, in some ways, I think it's
a healthy thing for me.
Okay.
Because I feel normal. I don't feel any different than a regular person. You know, I'm not. I mean, I would actually prefer to be anonymous. You can't be. I have been in a wheelchair most of my life, and you're not anonymous. You know, you're there. You know, people. Well, they do see you differently. You know, it's like most of the time, you know, when Patricia and I are out, you know, people will ask her, you know, what does he want? You know, that kind of thing. And, you know, that's just the way it is. And I didn't really want to. I mean, you know, in some ways, it's kind of like a little bit of VIP treatment. You know, when you travel someplace, you know, they take, you know, like I know, you know, when we get to get on the plane first, but we get to get off the plane last. And I mean, we were going someplace, and we were in Switzerland, I think, in the airport there. And so, you know, they got us off. Oh, we were going to Africa, and they got me off. You know, we got off the plane, and this guy said, handicapped people over here. You know, there was another line, and I said, well, couldn't I just stay with, because we were, you know, as a group, you know, I said, can I just stay with these people? And he said, handicapped people over here. You know, so Patricia started pushing in, he said, you know, you can't do that. And so he pushed me over into this sort of another area. And then he pulls these curtains back all around, and then he puts on rubber gloves. And he had a gun. And I said, what are you doing with the rubber gloves? And I could hear all our friends on the other side, they were all laughing. And he said, well, I'm just going to pat you down. And I said, well, okay, that'll work. But anyway, you know, and so I was thinking, you know, this is a particular time that I would not like to be special. And And sometimes when you're special like that, things happen.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's good too. I mean, it's nice to be. I mean, to have certain things work out like that. But in the long run, I think anybody, they'd rather be a normal, able-bodied person than a disabled person. Although it's really who I am. I can't think of me. I don't dream of myself in any kind of circumstances other than, whatever happens to me, I'm disabled. So even in my subconscious, I'm still disabled, or whatever you want to call it, crippled. I guess we can't use those words anymore. Thank goodness, in some ways.
Such a harsh word, right?
Well, life is harsh sometimes.
Yeah. To that point, do people ask you, sometimes it's uncomfortable for others, I guess, to ask you certain things, to talk about you, and they don't want to just sit and ask you questions. But however it is, it makes them feel uncomfortable, which must feel awful for you, because sometimes you just want to have a normal conversation with someone. Yeah. When people do ask you, though, how do you explain your disability, and how then, how does it feel, and how do you get that across?
Usually adults don't deal with that, I think but children do.
Yeah. And
I do a lot of school programs. I go anytime I'm invited anywhere. I go to schools. Second and third graders or whatever, high school. But it seems like the younger the children, the more interesting the questions are. They say, like, how do you eat? And I said, well, sort of like a dog, a little bit sometimes. But I get it done, obviously. And, I don't know, I can't think of as many interesting questions as, if Patricia was here, she loves going with me and she loves the questions that they ask. But they're not afraid to ask anything. And I find that very refreshing. And I don't mind, answering any kind of question. Mm-hmm. And but I think probably, rarely do people ask me about anything. It's not. I don't mind answering any questions.
Yeah. Is it a pain thing? Is it painful?
Am I in pain?
Yeah, like you're,
no.
And it's arthrogryposis.
That's a good
right?
question.
Yeah,
that's a good question. No, I'm really not. I get stiff, mm-hmm. But I have an indoor pool at home.
Yeah,
and I swim, and I exercise in there every day, and I don't necessarily call it swimming. I call it not drowning. And so, but I get in there and do all that kind of stuff, and I get massages. Massage therapy, and I wish I'd done that long ago. But a good massage therapist, they can find out exactly where something's not right, and they mash on it until it's right. And that's made a gigantic difference with me, And unfortunately, it's, it's not something that Medicare will pay for or any of that kind of thing. And, it's kind of an expensive hobby. But it's, that's made a big difference. I know, I remember talking to a number of people older people with arthrogryposis that I've known over the years. They talked about they talked about the pain, and stuff, and just from being stiff and rigid and that kind of thing, because it really, a lot of this is kind of some kind of particular rigidity. And I think I figured that out. It's not, I'm not in pain. I feel really good.
Yeah.
Diet and exercise and nature are the things. Being outside. I love. We've had a series of motorhomes and travel trailers and all these kind of things over the years, and I've done a great deal of that. And quite often, or a lot of my landscape pictures were done out. On the scenes, in Utah and Big Bend, Texas, Grand Canyon, a lot of Oklahoma landscapes here. I love painting outside, and I love being outside. It's like I think that's a mental health thing. Mm-hmm. It truly is.
Yeah. Tell me about your chair. How long have you had this current chair?
I just had this a couple of years, and this one goes up and down, and it's bigger. The ones I've had before were smaller, and they could get through tighter situations. And so this thing, when I first got it, I was, sort of like the Hall of Fame. I was knocking things over. I've chipped up a lot of doorways, and it's a little bulldozer. You have to be careful with it. But it will elevate. And so now, when I at that Hall of Fame thing, and at the party beforehand, I can raise this up till I'm head high with everybody else. Mm-hmm. And psychologically that makes a difference. You're right there with them. I was thinking either that or maybe we need to get everybody to sit down in a chair. But like there's a lot of disability jokes, like how many able-bodied people does it take to screw in a light bulb? And it's like one. It's pretty funny. But and when I was at OU, they put me in the handicapped dorm my first semester, and that was a unique experience. Dad and I went it was Cleveland House, and he said, let's just go down there and look at it. And so we did. And I wore these long leg braces at the time, and they weighed about 25 pounds apiece. And there's stainless steel with stirrups and all this kind of thing, and whole bunches of leather straps, and they were sort of uncomfortable. And so anyway, I'm walking in there, and I'm walking down the hall in Cleveland House. And way down at the end of the hall, I see this, door was open, and I could see a couple of backs of wheelchairs sticking out, And so, and when I'm walking with those braces, they made sort of a distinct sound, And all of a sudden, this guy said, wait a minute. He said, I hear clomp. And my hair stood up on end, and it's like, I was in about 1960 or 59, I was at the Bethany Convalescent Hospital, and usually, like in the summers, I'd always have some kind of surgery or something, especially, all in grade school and high school. And so, there's always, there were always the new guy at the clinic was always wanting to try something, experiment with me, and so they wanted me to see if I could get along without these braces, and they did these electrical shock things with me, which I always thought was some sort of, because I'd seen these war movies, and I'd seen them do this kind of thing, and that's exactly what I thought this was. Yeah. And so, and it felt like it too. They always said, "This doesn't hurt," and I said, "Let me try it on you."
You sit here and take this.
Let's reverse this thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm walking down this thing, and this guy comes out in a wheelchair, and he says, "By gosh, it is Clump." And so I was there then, and he was there then, and that was everybody had a nickname at the Bethany Convalescent Hospital. It was like these big wards, and there'd be like 20, 25 people in there, And at night they would shut the whole place down, and it would just be us in there. It was like Lord of the Flies. And you wouldn't believe it. And so, there's this guy, and that was him. And he was Michael Tharp. And his nickname was Toad, because he'd had polio, and his legs were really small, and he was kind of jowly. And in his wheelchair, he looked sort of like a toad. And so everybody that had that, everybody had their own nicknames. There was Stick Man, there was Leg Bag, there was all these kind of other names. And so, sure enough, there's 4 or 5 guys in there that we're all about the same age, and it was like a reunion, and it was like. And it was unbelievable. And
that's brilliant.
It was outrageously unbelievable. There's such a thing, when you're sort of prepubescent or whatever, and you have all these, it's kind of like the Little Rascals or something, we were all involved in all this crazy stuff. Things, they were working on breaking out of a place, and and so, it was just horrible. But it was also a riot, and it was like really funny.
Yeah.
But, that was another amazing experience.
There's clearly some sense of adventure there with everybody, right? They're
man.
what can we do? We can do,
really
do something
was.
that we shouldn't be doing, but why not? Because no one else is here.
Boys will be boys.
Exactly.
I guess girls will be girls.
Yeah.
Kids will be kids, and it was all too much.
How early was it when you were diagnosed with arthrogryposis?
I was born with this.
Oh, okay.
Multiplex congenita.
Okay.
Yeah. And the pictures of me when I was born, I was all folded up. My hands were bent. This elbow was bent like this. My legs were all contracted. My feet were twisted up. It's just, you look at, I don't know where that picture went.
Yeah.
I don't have it. But, and it was shocking to look at. I remember, actually, most all the video that I've seen of myself recently or whatever, or pictures, I'm really surprised. Look, the guy really is disabled.
But you don't feel it?
No, I don't.
Did you ever have a conversation with your parents about how they felt when you were born?
Oh, they were great, absolutely great.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother, my mom's mother, said, and I was born in Fort Worth, and that's where she was. That's where my mom was. She was in Fort Worth. Dad was in the Army Air Corps in World War II in Fort Worth, and that's where he was stationed. And so that's how come they met. And Mamo, as she's just wanted to be called. Said that you can't keep him. You know, you need to put him in a cardboard box and leave him on the church step or something. But no, my mom was really a champion of people with disabilities. She was on many boards, and she did a lot of stuff for a lot of people. And she heard that Roy Rogers was going to come to Oklahoma City, and that was in 1954. And so she wrote him and asked him to come and see me. I was in the hospital, and I had just gone through traction to get my legs straightened out so that I could walk. And it was just the beginning thing of that. I just gotten out of traction. So I was in the Oklahoman with Roy Rogers looking at me and letting me hold his gun, which I was trying to shoot off, you know, but
Right.
couldn't quite get it done.
Yeah.
Now, Mom liked Roy Rogers more than I did, actually. I liked Gene Autry.
Okay.
But Roy Rogers, I mean, I thought he was okay. I liked what was his name? Fuzzy or something, in that Jeep that he had, you know, Gabby Hayes and Clarabelle or something. That was the name of his Jeep.
Yeah.
So I guess I've always been a Jeep guy.
So at a young age, you grow up not knowing anything different, right? Like you can perceive but you have so many surgeries, probably so many before you can even start recalling them.
Right.
As soon as you're born.
Right.
Sounds like you were walking for some time. They seem to figure things out. Yeah.
I was. I walked for a long time, and I fell down a lot because I couldn't bend my legs or anything, and so I was like a tree. And once I lost my balance, chunk. And so, you know, that wasn't fun. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay.
I don't know what's going on here. Anyway, so. Yeah, they were always doing different things. Like, they were going to straighten out my hands, my right hand, and so I think it was in 1960. I was at Children's Hospital, and they put a cast on my hand, and then every day or so they would come in and cut a wedge out of it, and bend my hand up, and then replaster it.
Yeah.
And then the next day they'd come and saw that part off, and then they'd bend my hand up a little bit more and replaster it. And so they finally got my hand spread out. Spread your hand out. Put it in front of the camera over here. Yeah, like that. They got my hand like that.
Yeah.
They had to put me on morphine because it was so excruciating. I mean, it really was. I mean, you know, without the pills, you know, and then the pills would wear out, or the shots. I think it was the shots. And then finally, I know the guy came back in, you know, the doctor, and they saw that cast off, and my hand goes right back the way it was. Only it was a lot more sensitive. You know, he tried to straighten. He knew, well, we can straighten it out. You know, it's like, yeah. And so some of these things work and some things don't. But, you know, a lot of things like that.
Talking of your artistic visionary, your artistic ability, or the creative side of you, when does that start coming into kind of like your earliest memories? And obviously you go on and have a gallery and you have you open up a storefront with your mum. What's the earliest memory of you wanting to go and create something and put paint or pen to paper?
I've always drawn. It's what I did. Ever since I can remember. I remember I had, as a little bitty kid, I had it was sort of a table, but there was a hole in the middle of it. It had wheels on it. And then they would just plop me down in the center of it. And then so it had sort of a table surface all around it. And so I could turn the thing around too. And so I'd spend most of the day like that in there, drawing and stuff, and I had my paper, and I didn't really have pens. I had pencil, and I had colored pencils and stuff and paper, and so I just sort of got lost in that. It was something that I could do, and I just kept doing that. I kept, probably as an early teenager, 12, 13, something, I was heavy into making model airplanes. And I painted them up. I had the big tester set of all the different colors. And so I would mix and blend those enamel colors and camouflage stuff on planes and do all these things. And I'd put this stuff together myself and did all that. And that was really the first time that I really kind of done any painting. And I did that with my teeth. I could draw with my hand because I can't raise my hand up. And so when you're doing pastel or charcoal or any kind of paint, you're going to smear it. With a pen, I didn't, so ballpoint pens were good. But when I was doing those planes, I put the brush in my teeth, and I got pretty accurate with it. And so that was my first painting stuff. I was painting, like where using flat black and putting a little thinner in that area, and then watching the black just kind of feather out, and so it looked like what the exhaust looked like on from an engine, and that was all really intriguing, and then when I was, I think it was in 1961, I was in the hospital again. This time they weren't working on my hands. I think they were doing something on my ankles. And this was my last, I told them I didn't want to do that anymore. Because I was getting ready to go to high school. And so Miss America comes through Children's Hospital with all these hospital mucky mucks.
Is this Children's Hospital in Bethany?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah,
No, it's OU Children's?
This is
okay.
And so that's where I went to the clinic.
Okay.
I was always, that's where I always went. And then, so I was messing with charcoal. And white sheets, charcoal. These guys came in and they were really surprised because everything was black, white and black. Sheets were black and the charcoal and all this kind of thing. And Miss America, and they introduced me to her, and all this kind of thing. And she was looking at what I was doing, and she thought that was all very nice. And then, as they were leaving, one of the administrators or whoever was with her said, "I think there is an art class for a scholarship at the Oklahoma Science and Arts Foundation, the Kirkpatrick Planetarium, all that stuff that was at the fairgrounds."
Yeah.
would you be interested in doing that, taking a class there? And so I said, yes. And so I did a portfolio of some stuff, and they wanted to see, I was like, 14, 15. And so they looked at my stuff and they said, well, we don't think you should be in the children's class at all, so we're going to put you in an adult class. And so I took a drawing class there. And I'd had drawing, we had drawing stuff at Christ the King school, very bad stuff, but it was there. And so I started that a little bit, and then I found out that this lady was teaching and my mom, we belonged to a lot of different art clubs, and stuff, and so she was definitely interested in me doing it. I was definitely interested in doing it, and I had entered the state fair art thing before and won a whole lot of awards. And so she thought, And so I was familiar with the fairgrounds and all that. So I took these classes on Tuesdays and Thursday nights, and Dad would take me from 7 till 9. And I took a watercolor class with Lucille Reed, who is this lady that had just come back from the Orient. And I'd seen some of her work, and her watercolors were exactly what I wanted to do. They were deep colors. They weren't namby-pamby, wishy-washy things. They were, they made a statement. It was like her things were, they were like Oriental paintings, and I really liked Oriental paintings. Only she was doing it in a Western style. So I took her class, and that really changed my life. That's when I started watercoloring, and I decided I wasn't going to be fearful. And I had never done any art stuff doing anything with my teeth around anybody, and except at home. And so I decided, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it here, and all she taught us was how to clean your brush. That was the secret. How to clean your brush, because with watercolor, it's water management, and if you do these things, you can control the amount of water. You can go from dry brush to really wet brush. You can do all kinds of stuff like that. And then she said, well, we're going to use one color. And then after a while, we're going to use two colors. And gradually, like red, yellow, and blue, that's it. All those together, make black, and any color in between. Those are all the only colors you need. And, it was mind-blowing, really. I surprised myself. I fell into it like the perfect thing. It was something that I was totally in charge of, and people liked what I was doing. I could tell. And that was really my first show with contemporary people, because each class had a little they had a little art show at the end of each one, out in the, and so I won first, and then I started doing other things. I joined these other things, the Oklahoma Museum of Art and Oklahoma Art Guild and all these different things. I was made a member of the Art Directors Club of Oklahoma City. And those guys were really good artists. And all the stuff they did was not ad art. All the things they did were, was fine art.
Yeah.
And so they were really welcoming, and it was really good. And they had their meetings at the Lone Star Brewery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had a Lone Star brewery here in Oklahoma City. And so at those meetings, there was a spigot in the wall, and they all drank beer, And so I drank beer too. And then you could bring a guest with you to their meeting things. And so I would bring various friends of mine from high school, and we'd go, and we'd drink beer.
Drink beer and paint.
But anyway.
Yeah. Before that moment with Lucille and teaching and having this moment of winning this competition, what were the dreams of you growing up as a kid? Did you always think, you always mentioned there was artwork and there was always pencils and pens and paint all around you growing up. Did you always think that you wanted to be an artist, or did you have aspirations to do a business or anything else? Did you have any other hobbies?
I didn't really think of myself as an artist. It never really occurred to me. And I actually was a successful artist.
Yeah.
Because during high school, I would have a show at Penn Square Mall or at Shepherd Mall or something like that. And I'd make $500, $700 on a weekend by selling 18 by 24 size ink drawing for $25. And I had a lot of them. I was I've always been prolific. And so, I might sell one for $50. And so I wasn't mowing yards, but I was making more money than those guys were. And but I didn't think that I was I didn't really think of that's what I was going to do. I didn't think of that as a vocation. I didn't know what I thought of it as. It was just something that I loved, and I was going to do it no matter what. It didn't make any difference. But I was making money with it. I remember laying in bed and thinking, gosh, you could do a $75 picture a day. How many? 365 days times 75. Man, that's not too bad. And I was thinking, something like that might work. And but I didn't. I didn't really think about it. And then I was a psychology major at OU.
Okay.
And I thought that I was going to use art. Art was a minor to help. It was almost a field then, and it was like working with children and other people. Kind of figure out what was eating them through what they drew or painted. And there were all these kind of things. You'd have them draw a house tree person, and you do there's all these different kind of things that you do. I thought that's what I was going to do. And my uncle in Minnesota, my dad's brother, worked for vocational rehabilitation in Minnesota. And he knew the guy that was in charge of vocational rehabilitation in Oklahoma. And he said, you need to get your degree and then go to work for the Oklahoma Department of Rehabilitation Services. And once they hire you and you're there for 6 months, they can't fire you. And he said, you're not going to like it, but you're going to, he said, this art thing that you're doing, he said, that's the only hobby you're going to have. That's the only thing you're going to be able to do for entertainment. You're not going to be able to do anything else. And so he said, you need to get a job with vocational rehab. And he said, and get a job like everybody else. So you don't like it. I mean, nobody likes their job. It's just something you do, and then you get to do this other thing. That changed my mind. I decided instantly that I was going to drop psychology and become an artist. And I threw myself into it. I said, okay, he really, really helped me. He helped me figure this out. Because I was kind of in the doldrums at OU. I was just, I was kind of slaggering along, And then I hightailed it out of there. I got through with the rest of it, got my degree, and got out of it. And I started painting, and for real, seriously, a whole lot of it. And so that
Yeah.
I mean, really.
When you say getting after it and really painting for real, what was that mindset shift? And specifically for you, was that just putting out as much production? You mentioned you're prolific. Was that just doing as much as you could every day, or was that
and finding the right subject matter?
Okay.
I kind of knew what people were interested in, and I looked around at the art shows, and I saw that nobody else was doing what I was thinking about doing, and that idea was local landmarks, things that people could relate to. My degree at OU, drawing and printmaking, most all of it was non-representational stuff. You didn't need to draw something like it was, because that's what cameras are for. And so you just get out there and do something else. You do some kind of stripes or something, or you do color forms. You do this kind of thing. That's fine and perfect, but that's not sellable here. That's not what people want. I mean, we're fairly conservative here. I like what I can see. And they like Western painting. They like cows and horses and that kind of thing. Well, I wasn't going to do cows and horses in particular, but there were a lot of interesting things around, and so I started doing that, and it was like, yeah, I mean, really, it worked, and I enjoyed doing it. It was kind of homage to the things I appreciated. These things, like I said, I love landscapes, and I like being outdoors, and I like doing those kind of things. So that was intense. I thought, good grief. And I met with, especially after Patricia and I got married, and then all of a sudden I'm supporting her and 3 boys, and all this kind of thing, but it just fell into place. It was, and we were successful. It was wonderful to have somebody believe in me like she did. I had to kiss so many girl frogs. And then finally, and then she didn't even know who I was. She hadn't heard of me, really. She didn't know I was a internationally famous lip artist. That's what the Foundation for the Disabled, I did all these pictures for them. And on the back of each one of those cards that I did that they used as a fundraiser, it said it was done by Greg Burns, an internationally famous lip artist. I didn't even know there was such a thing, and I didn't change it. I liked it.
Yeah. What was the first time you recognized that on the back of those cards that they were sending out?
Well, I thought, because they showed me what they were going to do, and I said I like it. Yeah. But in a lot of ways that really made me, because back then the television stations did these public service announcements for all these different things. And so, I don't really think I saw any of them before 10 o'clock.
Okay.
But if you watched, especially at Christmas time, there, Greg Burns Christmas cards, and it showed each one, done for the Foundation for the Disabled, $5 a package. It's like they sold 1 billion of them, and all of a sudden, and I was there. They had me drawing on camera, So, are you Greg Burns? So. But that, you set out to do something, and it, it worked for them, and it worked for me too. It was like, wow, you couldn't have bought that kind of publicity.
You mentioned Patricia and 3 boys. How'd you guys meet?
We met some friends of ours. She's a school teacher, and my sister was a school teacher, and a lot of my friends were school teachers, and a lot of them were soccer coaches. And so on Sundays, they over at the park over there in it's like at Chartel and 45th or something. There's a park over there, and that's where they had these things. And so I went over there. David Pipkin and his wife was a school teacher with Patricia, and there were all kinds of maybe 30 people there. So I was there with my sister and her husband and watching the soccer thing, and I just met her, introduced me to her, and I thought she was pretty attractive. She had this headband on. She looked like an Indian. And then so we got together, and I remember we met at this bar, and she had this big green Ford station wagon. And I said, well, is that your parents' car? And she said, no, I've got 3 boys. And so I said, great. And it was great. They're great guys. They call me Dad, and we have 10 or 11 grandchildren. I don't know. So that changes all the time, and we have great grandchildren. So it's we have a nice family.
Yeah. Are they all local?
No, none.
No. None?
None.
Oh, really?
No, some in Denver, and some
wow.
in California, Los Angeles, and some in Tampa, and some in Dallas.
Yeah.
And they're busy people.
Well, you're busy too.
Yeah.
There's plenty of things to do, and always active in traveling and seeing things. I want to go back to the time where you decide to open up the store in Northwest Oklahoma City with your mom. Tell me about that time and why you guys decided to open a store and go into business together.
That was after I graduated from OU.
Okay.
And I was really, I was hoping to go to New Mexico. And Mom had opened this thing called the Sunburst. And she had a lot of miniatures. These people collected these miniature things for doll houses. She had gifts, and she had a good taste in all these kind of things, And so she had some, sort of interesting stuff there. And then she said, well, why don't you just come and have a studio there, and you can put some of your pictures. And she had a gallery. There were a number of artists that she had their work in there. And so I thought, well, maybe I should do this. And I didn't really have anything set up in New Mexico. Like, I didn't know how I was going to really do that.
Why did you want to go to New Mexico?
I liked it.
Okay.
And I had friends there, but I wanted to. I kind of, Taos. I liked that area, and so I did that. And I made $55,000 my first year there.
Wow.
You know, that was back in 70.
Yeah.
You know. And, you know, really not doing anything, you know, just dorking around. And so it seemed viable. And you know, I did it. I was sort of a wastrel a little bit. I didn't really have any responsibilities. I still had a lot of friends at OU, and I went down to a bar down there almost every day. And so I would work like crazy until about 3 o'clock, and then I'd leave. Bad. And so, you know, it was really, you know, I mean, I had taken the easy route.
Okay.
And since I couldn't really take care of myself, you know, I really couldn't. And I was helping, I was living with my sister and brother-in-law. And so my rent was helping them buy their house. And that really worked really pretty well.
Yeah.
It was a really neat house, and it was in, you know, had an elevator in it, and I had a studio that was up in the trees in a sunroom, you know, and it was just so peaceful and nice, you know, and I did a lot of work there too, and you know, it was an easy life.
Yeah, I mean, making $55,000, I guess after you graduate, and
Yeah.
like I said, having
Yeah.
quote not that many responsibilities, and
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of feel like you've made it at that point, right?
Yeah. And then Mom had a partner that I bought out. And the things changed, and we had a different accountant. And the way he set things up was the more money I took out, the less percentage of the thing did I have any part of. And so it was like I had to ask my mother for money, you know, which was, you know, and I didn't get my money anymore. You know, it came kind of through her. And I mean, she was generous, and she was, you know, but still, I was controlled. And I started working less and less. And so, and then when I met Patricia, all of a sudden, having control over myself became important. And I realized that I was tied to my mother. And it was kind of a turnoff to my getting anywhere with somebody, you know. And but it took really. I mean, you know, I know a lot of later on. You know, I heard a lot of people saying, well, you know, to get a hold of Greg, you're going to have to wrestle him from his mother. You know, and you know, a lot of girls didn't kind of want to go through that. And so anyway, we just, you know, I remember when Patricia and I first started dating and everything, and I remember we were just kind of hanging out, and I was telling her about the prints, and that I had all these different reproductions, and that I sold those, you know. And so she said, well, tell me about them again. You know, and so she thought that was really pretty intriguing. And so after I got out of the sunburst, which was it was a little disastrous at first, you know, and fortunately, you know, you feel like you're hurting your mother or something. But I mean, she came around. She realized, I mean, they said, well, the way you did it was the only way to do it. You know, it had to be a little bloody there for a while.
Yeah.
But it worked out. And you know, everybody was happy with it later. I mean, really, I'm sure she was fed up with it too, deep down inside. But we made a real big success of it. I mean, she had great ideas, and we traveled and we did art shows, and it was really fun.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we took the kids with us, and we went to different places, and you know, we camped. And I hadn't really done any of that very much. She was into going to real places and doing real things.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. And it was magnificent.
Did you have any, because you'd never done it, and I mean, you must have had a little bit of anxiety around, oh, we're going to go out into the middle of nowhere and camp. What were those
No,
experiences?
not really.
Not really?
Well, I mean,
Also, you mentioned you love being outside.
I remember going to, we were like in Aspen, and it was raining like crazy, and we were in these little tents. And the only bathrooms they had were these pit toilets. And I remember, you know, Mother Nature calling. And so I was in the toilet, and then I was ready to get out of the toilet, and Richard, the oldest, I asked him to help me. So he had to pull my pants up. And, you know, it was kind of freaky, but at the same token, I mean, we did it, you know, and it was like, you know, it didn't scar him for life. And, you know, they all, I mean, I think they realized that that I needed a little help doing some things like that, but there were benefits with us. I mean, I think we were really supportive of. We were able to do things for them, you know, that were, you know, worked out really well, and you know, still do.
Yeah.
I'm proud of all the things that we've been able to do for the different grandkids and things, but there's nothing like it really. You know, having a family like that.
Yeah.
It's all it's cracked up to be. Believe all the good stories.
What are some of the things, you know, you mentioned going and speaking and being, I don't think you probably don't see yourself as a role model, but you are. What are the things that you tell others when you go out to speak and people you speak to, whether it's the kids asking you questions with no filter and wanting to know all the stuff because they don't have, you know, the stuff that we have when we're 30, 40, 50 years old and the awareness to ask the questions or whatever. What are the things you like to tell people? What are the things that you want people to take away when they meet you?
Well, you know, there are difficulties in life, and they can be overcome. And you don't think they can, and maybe you're almost sure that they can't. And then all of a sudden, it'll come to you that there is a way to do that. I've had gone through so many different things, you know, by myself or, you know, which I got myself in some kind of predicament. And I think, oh, okay, this is it. And then I figured out a way to resolve the situation. And persistence. You know, I mean, there's a lot to be said for that. You don't, you know, talent is one thing, and but if you don't use it, you know, it's not going anywhere. And there's a lot to be said for persistence. You know, you keep doing something and you look at what you've done, especially art-wise. I think that's the cool thing about being involved in art, painting and drawing, is you look at it and you've created something and you can see it. And you need to let go of it after it's done. And you can't overdo it. And you can't underdo it. It has to be just right. But you'll see it. You'll get a sense of it. And life is sort of like that too. You know, there are gigantic problems in drawing and painting. First line is hardest, you know. And the second line's a little easier, and especially when you're kind of out there and you're working on something and you think this is not going to work. You feel like, oh, I need to tear this up. And when I've taught kids or even adults, I say, you're not going to tear anything up. You're not going to stop. You're not going to give up. There are problems in here, but study it, think about it, and there are ways to resolve it. You're just not there yet, and don't give up. And of course, that's a philosophy of life, too. I think, when I've done some videos of me working and seeing me do it, and it is sort of magic. It's amazing. Whenever you watch some guy, the happy tree guy,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, his stuff is, it's Zen, and I feel so lucky being able to do that particular kind of thing. But these guys that do woodworking or, I don't know, do you have any hobbies?
Golf, mostly.
Golf, okay.
Mm-hmm.
See, there you go.
Yeah.
You think where you want that ball to be. Well, our kids, Richard, the eldest one, was a pretty good tennis player. And then Michael, he wanted to take rodeo lessons. Richard he comes to me, he says, I'd like to take tennis lessons. Well, of course, And, you get them a tennis racket and tennis balls and tennis shorts and a tennis T-shirt and tennis shoes and tennis socks. And then Michael says, he wants to learn how to rodeo. So you got to get, well, first the thing, you try to figure out what particular kind of thing he wants to do. And, well, it takes a certain kind of rope. And then the rope needs a certain kind of saddle. And the saddle needs a certain kind of horse. And the horse needs a certain kind of trailer. And the trailer needs a certain kind of car to pull it.
Right.
Or truck. So those are all, that was fun. It was really fun. And my good friend Jack Gordy, he owned Teeners, I went to high school with him, and so he really helped me out with all that cowboy stuff. And life has been like that. I think you show them how to do it, and then you have some kind of critique, and especially with painting, as you're working on it, you put it up on an easel from a distance and you look at it. And when I'm painting, I've got my head down almost to the table, and even drawing, I'm looking at it from kind of like an angle like this. And so when you see it straight up and down, when you work on a drawing like this, when you're at an angle, like you're at the foot of it, maybe 45 degrees into it, then if you draw it, as you draw it, the perspective looks good. And then when you set it up on the easel to look at it like it's going to hang on the wall, it's not good. So I've had to learn to draw anticipating what it's going to look like. And the same thing with the colors, So those are little extra things, that go on with what you're doing. But I mean, I've been doing it for 60 years or so. So hopefully I've become facile at it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You have a great sense of humor. Where does that come from? What two of some of your favorite comedians or shows that you like to listen to, watching growing
up? I remember
up?
Jonathan Winters. I loved him, and I got to meet him at the Art Center one time. But he was always fun. His stuff. You give him a piece of string, and he no telling where he would go with it, and I don't know. I guess. My dad was funny. I mean, he had a good sense of humor. Kind of, like, well, here we go. It's like the. I think we had kind of a jolly family life. It's that was good. I've always. Seen the funny parts, I've been disruptive in class, I've gotten in trouble many times, for some teacher would say something unfortunate and I would, say something about it and then the class would think it's funny and then I would get in deep trouble. And, but, there is most of these really, a lot of real funny things are sort of tragic. The slapstick humor is not, it's not good if you're the slappee. And so, that I don't know.
Have you ever dove into, you mentioned being a psychology major in college, you ever dove into the psychology side of humor, being funny, and growing up with arthrogryposis?
Gryposis?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's, yeah. I mean, always, there's a, well, I call ourselves arthrogrypods, and the ones that I've met, they have a sense of humor. You have to be fairly well grounded, and realize the humor in whoever created us. It's like. I don't know. I haven't met any morose arthrogrypods. They're sort of ready to go for it. It's like you have to have that particular kind of sense of humor, and then that's kind of the way it was. In hospitals and stuff too, spending all that time, especially on wards with other kids like that. And I've done a lot of thought. I've had a lot of thoughts about things that turn out to be particularly funny.
I'm going to bring this up. I've been reading a book recently called On Fire by John O'Leary. And he was 7, 8 years old, decided to try and make a flame in his garage and ended up lighting a kerosene lamp on fire and it exploded and his house burned down. He's 8 years old, right? Burned it to his entire body. And he talks about all his surgeries in hospital, 2 or 3 brothers and sisters, family felt terrible, all of, going through all of this. And relating to, and he's fine now, motivational speaker, travels all around the country, and he has third-degree burns everywhere, and the only place he didn't have really bad burns was on his head because his sisters were running back into the burning house, grabbing buckets of water and throwing them on his head at the time. And so they took all the skin from his scalp and replenished his body, and it's a fantastic book. To that point, growing up the way that you have and having so many surgeries and maybe sometimes not being able to convey how you feel when you're younger, trying to get the words out and be like, look, talk to me a little bit about kind of the mental side of things and how you have personally had to overcome, whether it's resentment through your faith or just why have I been dealt this, and turned that around to I'm going to do something with this. I have a huge passion for painting. I have a very good skill at it, and been extremely successful to the point that you're 77, 78 years old and look back on life to be like, wow. Because when you put everything on your resume and look back, there's been, if you'd done half of that, that would have been considered successful had you known your position in your situation.
That's one reason I didn't want to accept the award.
Right.
There's other people out there, you need to get a hold of them.
That's a big question.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to answer it. For one thing, no matter how brave you think I am or the guy you were talking about, the human spirit itself is such that you may say that you want to kill yourself. Some people do. But when it boils down to it, chances are you're not. You're gonna. It's amazing to me that of all those kind of things and the pain that I've gone through, is not really rememberable.
Okay.
You remember it as being painful, but pain doesn't come back the way it actually is when you're being excruciated. There's a memory of it, like, oh yeah, that was painful, But you can look back on it and in its old history. It doesn't have any bearing. I mean, you can go through similar things again, and you think, well, gosh, got to do it. Especially with him, with all his surgeries and things. He knew what each one was about. That's incredible. I haven't had anything like that. Some things are not easy to do and cause a little bit of grief, but you do it. You have to. And you're always thinking about ways of doing it that are easier. And then, but, it's just part of life. It's like anything. It's like stuff that you do that you don't particularly like. You do it. Maybe it's not quite as fun as some stuff, or it's not fun at all. But it's, still has to be done. And maybe it's memories of some mistakes that you've made. Those things kind of maybe hit harder, but not the pain itself. Not that. It's like, boy, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Regrets. with physical stuff and things that you've done with other people or things you've done to other people. Those things are as painful as anything else. Psychologically, absolutely.
Yeah.
And age is, in some ways, is there is a little bit of wisdom there. With me, it's like, if you make a big mistake, then maybe you don't do it again. With me, I've made maybe that same mistake 30 or 40 times, and then, like the 47th time, you're thinking, well, I think maybe I'm going to try not to do that this time. And so you're 78 years old and you've done that a lot, so there is something to be said for age.
Yeah.
Some people are so pleasant and uniformly lovely that they don't do those kind of things. They can just get through there, and they're always dancing through a little field of daisies. But not all of us can do that. But I mean, I've had an adventurous life, and really, traveled a lot of great places, and met a lot of interesting people in different cultures, which is, why. I'm not sure we're all that unique here in the United States. I think we can be very good, but most all people that have children and want to have good lives for them, and they want to get along with their neighbors and that kind of thing, and it's not. They need to be able to exist too. And I don't know.
Yeah. One question I'd love to ask people, I've kind of added in recently, and it kind of forces me to think back as well, which is generally a great exercise. But the question is, if you were to go back over your life and relive one day, what would that day be and why?
Oh, boy. Wow. Well, the Hall of Fame thing probably would be a good one. Couldn't really, it was kind of magical, having the family here like that, and all these lovely friends coming from all over the place to be there. And, it was just, everybody was so, it was just wonderful. A particular day, I would say that would have to be it. That really was something. There are trips that I've been on that I think were magnificent, or particular events. I remember we went on a junket on the USS Oklahoma City, the fast attack submarine, out of Fort Lauderdale. And I was on this junket. I had done a painting of the submarine as a benefit for the sailors on the ship, for their families. The sales of those prints would go to a fund that would be used for the sailors' families, the crew families. And they had my pictures inside the submarine. They had various of my pictures. So they lowered me down into the submarine, these guys, with this kind of harness, and then we went to the wardroom, and we went, and I stayed and Patricia and another officer stayed in the captain's quarters. And then there are all these instruments and everything in there. And one particular thing in general was that I got to fly the sub. And they told me not to tell anybody. So let's keep this under our hats, okay?
Yeah, everyone listening, don't tell anybody.
But for about 30 seconds, I got down in the cockpit of this thing, and like there's a steering wheel, fairly much like an airplane,
Okay.
like a private plane. And you have pedals, and you have a wheel that you can turn, and you have instruments in front of you, and you can see flat. You're underwater. We're like 900 or 1,000 feet under the ocean, but I got to turn us this way, and I got to turn us that way, and I got to go up a little bit, and I got to go down a little bit, and so I think that was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And but
Pretty good day.
pretty good day.
Yeah.
That was a pretty good day.
Yeah.
That was a pretty good.
Back to your childhood of painting, airplanes, and you probably never think you're going to put your painting gig is ever going to put you in a submarine, and then let alone steal
I
the
actually
thing
did
too.
a picture of the new submarine, the USS Oklahoma, that's going to be. I think it's going to be launched here next year.
Okay.
And they're going to take the sail. They're taking the sail, the top part of the submarine, off the old Oklahoma City, and it's going to be put in the park down there,
Yeah.
by the Oklahoma River, and that's going to be really cool.
That's cool.
They're going to do it like a big berm, so that it's going to show
it
like
looks like-
the hump of the submarine itself. And I think they're going to put the tail thing sticking up the back,
cool.
and it's going to look like the thing's in the water, and only it's going to be in the grass.
Yeah.
And the new sub's going to be pretty cool too.
Yeah.
I don't know that they'll let me drive it.
Hey, you can always ask.
Probably
right?
probably the FBI is going to come after me. Or
Yeah.
something.
That's
But-
amazing.
But I've been able to do a lot of fun pictures. Commissions for different things. I did a picture of this building, and that was a pleasure. And I'm still doing stuff. I'm working on things, and
Yeah.
just as much. Well, no, maybe not just as much. I used to really pound it, and now I'm not. But it's about time to slow down a little bit. Yeah.
I get the feeling we could sit here for hours and tell stories because there's so many to tell. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for sharing.
No, thank you for being
this
interested.
This is amazing. And thank you for my gift too. Thank you for giving me a print of Southern Nazarene. That's really thoughtful of you. It's where I graduated, and got a lot of friends up there, and so that means a lot. I'm gonna put that in a frame as soon as possible. For people listening, they can go to your website, gregburnsfineart.com.
gregburns-fineart.com.
Okay. Find all your work there, and then are you still taking commissions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can contact me through that, and I work on all kinds of stuff, and it's a lot of fun. I like even different kinds of things like that, and yes,
Keeps you creative.
yeah, right. You don't know what you're going to be after next,
Yeah.
but that's the excitement of it too.
Absolutely. Things every day is different. The good thing is that your skill in fine art and everything that you do, you can draw. People probably think you can draw everything, right? Or come to you with some crazy ideas.
Yeah.
But,
Well, I'm sure I can't. I'm positive about that.
Well, thanks so much for coming in. Congratulations on being inducted into last year's Oklahoma Hall of Fame 2024 class. And for people listening, I'll put the link to Greg's website in the description down below. And if you see Greg anywhere, come in, say hi, and say you heard the podcast. So thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
For people listening, we will catch you next episode. Cheers.
Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do.
This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my 2 pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my 2 golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And adding to that is the Doghouse. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too, but I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC, and hopefully our pups will run into each other.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.